earned its nickname the Turkey. Second aircraft, the Valk Corsair fighter, owes its origins back into World War II. And doing an aborted takeoff is the tracker, the accelerate stop. It will be great to see this aircraft back in the air again. Haas team is working on it. Haas actually has two of these machines, former Australian Navy anti-submarine warfare aircraft. That would have been a sight very familiar in the Pacific Theatre especially. The Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber and the Valk Corsair. Corsair also known as the bent wing bird because of the shape of the wings. If you have a look at it, it's gull wing. The whole reason for that shape is because of the power of the engine had to be absorbed by the propeller. Now, the propeller would have been huge, especially in the early models, so they actually decided to reduce the size of the prop by bending the wing. That was part of the design. That whole centre section on the Corsair is actually spot welded originally. On all of the rebuilds now, they now change that spot welding to riveting. Coming back in again. As we said yesterday, this would be a sight to put fear into the hearts of any Japanese destroyer captain. Two of the most capable Navy aircraft to emerge from World War II. Corsair flown today by Mick Cordwell and the Avenger by Paul Bennett. This aircraft is actually owned, the Avenger, by Paul Bennett. It forms part of his, shall we call it, the flying circus based at Cessnock. Nick flying the Corsair, which is owned by Graham Hoskins down in Victoria, based out of Tyab on the Mornington Peninsula. Is currently the only Corsair flying in Australia. There is another one about to fly up in Mareeba in Queensland. It's virtually ready to undertake its first post-restoration flight as we speak. Now Paul bringing the Avenger back in. Avenger designed by Grumman, but it was also built by Eastern Aircraft Division of General Motors. This is a General Motors built aircraft. They're called the TBM, whereas the Grumman ones are the TBF.
I'm right in saying that this was the heaviest single-engine World War II aircraft.
It was designed to take over from the Douglas TBD Devastator. Now, TBD, torpedo, bombing, reconnaissance. It was actually flew in August 1941, but shown to the public on the 7th of December 1941 on the east coast of the United States, not knowing that only hours later the Japanese would attack the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Hence the aircraft got its name Avenger. 3-seat, pilot, and also a turret gunner. You can see the turret at the end of that very long glasshouse canopy. There's also another gunner's position in the ventral part of the fuselage to pick up any aircraft that were attacking from below. You can see where that position is at the end of the bomb bay. There's a slight notch in the bottom of the fuselage, and that's where that gun position was.
Originally flown on the 7th of August 1941, it was introduced to service in 1942 and flew all the way through to the 1960s. There were almost 10,000 of these aircraft built, worked by 9 military airlines and 39 different variants. Incredible.
First went into action at the Battle of Midway and was credited with, there were only 6 of them there actually, but they was credited with pulling off the Japanese Zeros from combat air patrols over their carriers and allowing the dive bombers to attack the carriers. That was the single greatest defeat for the Japanese Navy during the war. Loss of many carriers. You just see the bomb bay doors closing there.
A couple of very famous people flew this aeroplane as well. Paul Newman, the actor, he was a turret gunner on the Avenger. He was also colourblind. And George Bush, the youngest US naval aviator, unfortunately was shot down.
His crew was unfortunately killed, but he managed to survive, obviously. Become President of the United States. You can see the markings on this aircraft. Top and bottom of the wings facing forward, and on the tail facing up is a broad arrow, a white broad arrow. What does this mean? Basically, these are the descriptors for the carrier air groups. Now this aircraft is painted up in the markings of a machine that was assigned to the USS Bunker Hill. All the carriers all had their marking on the deck, because you can imagine with a task group they could have up to 5 Essex class carriers and many of the other Jeep carriers, as they call them. You had to know which was your carrier. These were the symbols that were used.
These aircraft heavily armed as well. 5.30 or 0.30, 30 mil machine guns, and also 50 half-inch machine guns, essentially. 8 5-inch rockets, 2,000 pound bombs, or a Mark 13 torpedo weighing 2,000 pounds.
Coming in now, the Corsair, the Vought Corsair. This and the Hellcat became the US Navy's principal carrier-borne fighters in World War II, although it didn't start out very auspiciously, because even though they were flying some from carriers, they were difficult to land because that very long nose ahead of the cockpit. So basically what the Americans did was they employed these with the US Marine Corps initially from ground bases like Guadalcanal, where under the control of Pappy Boyington, you had the Black Sheep Squadron flying.
Ladies and gentlemen, can the owner of a vehicle registration number BNQ082 return to your car and move it, please? That's BNQ082. Also, DNX33 Delta. That's DNX33 Delta. Please return to your car and move it urgently. Thank you.
Corsair, powered by a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800, which was probably the most famous of the radial engines produced during the Second World War. Had an armament of 650 caliber machine guns, 2,000 pounds of bombs and drop tanks, and it could also carry 8 HVAR rockets, a 5-inch diameter. That's a high velocity aircraft rocket, unguided, to attack ground targets. As well as the bombs, could also carry napalm. Now, this particular machine is one of the very last productions. It's an F4U5. The aircraft was produced by Vought and also Goodyear during the war. And the markings you see on this particular machine are the Honduran Air Force. Now, this particular machine actually saw combat post-World War II. And we mentioned the soccer war when we were talking about the Mustang earlier on. This aircraft actually flew for the Honduran Air Force during that soccer war in 1969. It was allegedly due to the rivalry between El Salvador and Honduras at a soccer match, but the political tensions have been brewing for quite a long while. And one of the Honduran pilots, a guy called Major Soto, was quite successful in that combat, shooting down 3 El Salvadorian aircraft. It's owned by Graham Hoskins. Aircraft is based out of Tyab in Victoria, flown both by Nick Caldwell, and also Ben Lappin. Ben's up here, probably in the audience now, very eagerly looking to the scorecard there to just see how Nick's going. But this is a beautiful aircraft. It's the only one flying in Australia at the moment. One is soon to fly out of Mareeba in Queensland, and that is a World War II combat veteran up in Okinawa.
Now, these were prominent in the US Navy Pacific campaign and also the Royal Navy Pacific Fleet. There were quite a lot of losses, 538 combat losses and over 1,000 non-combat losses. The US Navy had a great ratio of kills though. They basically were achieving 11 kills for 1 loss. Principally utilised as a fighter bomber in the latter stages of World War II. And they also flew in post-war. And they had an AU-1 dedicated ground attack version.
This aircraft, as I said, F4U5. Now, these aircraft were also used by the US Navy in Korea. And there was one aircraft that was a night fighter version, the F4U5NL, was flown by a guy called Guy Borderland. He was known as Lucky Pierre. Now, he was what they called the triple treat ace. He was the only Navy piston-engined ace of Korea. He was the only Navy night fighter ace. And he was the only piston-engined ace. So basically he covered it all. And the aircraft that he flew had the 555, so very appropriate. This aircraft is absolutely magnificently restored up in Darwin and then flown back down across Australia. Based, as I said, out of Tyab in Victoria. As you heard the aircraft flying past, it just did not sound as if the engine was doing any work, but be that as it may, it's one of the most powerful radial engines to emerge from the Second World War for mass production.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, can the owner of BNQ082, that's BNQ082, please return to your car and move it? And also DNX33D, that's DNX33D, please return to your car and move it urgently. Thank you.
Wings Over Illawarra would like to thank the following supporters. Shellharbour City Council, owners of the beautiful Illawarra Regional Airport and proud supporters of Wings Over Illawarra. Local Aviation Safety Advisor Taraya Miller is at the Civil Aviation Safety Authority display for all your aviation safety related questions, and they've got loads of drone safety information and giveaways.
The New South Wales Government is proud to support this event via its tourism and major events agency, Destination New South Wales. There is plenty to do here in the Illawarra, whether it's bushwalking